This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. A plan by the provincial government to move some Manitoba housing tenants into privately owned apartments with additional rent support could face challenges. It's one part of the province's strategy to help end homelessness. As CBC's Josh Crabb reports, a low vacancy rate for rental suites may get in the way.
In an effort to make room for people living outside in homeless encampments, the Manitoba government wants to free up space in existing Manitoba housing units for transitional or supportive housing. It wants to do this in part by helping current tenants best positioned to succeed move from public housing into the private market with additional financial help. Manitoba housing resident Leanne Dacey likes the idea. She works full-time but says she wouldn't be able to afford a place in the private market without more help from the government.
I've been looking, but it's really hard to try to find something with not that good of a budget. I mean, I'm just making it by right now with paying $826 a month.
Right now, her rent is based on her income. She pays $826 per month. Dacey recently looked at a privately owned two-bedroom rental unit for $1,100 per month. For a place like that, she'd need an additional $274 per month from the province to afford the move. The NDP government isn't saying how much extra financial help it would be willing to give Manitoba housing tenants or the maximum monthly rent that would be allowed under this plan. And those aren't the only wrinkles to sort out.
So it's a tight market. It's a bad time to do the program because of that.
Avram Sharak with the Professional Property Managers Association of Manitoba supports the plan, but he points out Winnipeg's vacancy rate is 1.7%, and the average rent for a two-bedroom apartment is a little more than $1,500 per month.
You're talking about a few hundred units available and thousands of people looking for them.
There are also several thousand people on the waiting list for a Manitoba housing unit. The minister in charge, Bernadette Smith, says the government hasn't set a target for how many households would need to move to free up existing suites.
That's really based on how many people are willing to move. So we're not asking or kicking people out, right? So it's voluntary based.
But not everyone sees the private market as the answer. Resource Assistance for Youth Director of Housing Talia Potash says moving people who have been living stably in Manitoba housing may put them in a more precarious situation if the rent top-ups being promised are ever taken away.
If it's paused or if it's pulled, if we have a change of government, everyone will be at risk of eviction.
She says a better solution would be building more rent-geared to income housing and better maintaining Manitoba's current supply of social housing units. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The province is stepping in to help with what it says is life-changing medical care to a boy from Gaza. The child and his mother arrived here in Winnipeg just hours ago. This is the first of two Palestinian children that will be treated here. CBC's Gavin Axelrod joins us now. So Gavin, what else can you tell us?
Yeah, Brittany, this was a development we actually learned about just hours ago. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew says a child from Gaza and his mother arrived in Winnipeg Thursday. He said a second child will also be coming to Manitoba, but didn't provide many details. The 11-year-old boy is here for what the province described in a news release today as life-changing medical care. The child has complex medical needs and is unable to get the care he needs because of the war. The province said the boy was identified with the help of Doctors Without Borders. At a news conference this afternoon, the Premier said the boy was chosen because his medical needs match areas where the healthcare system has capacity.
It's going to be a balancing act. Like, we have to see, first of all, our ability to support these two kids while fixing the healthcare for everyone in Manitoba, which is job number one when we come to the building each and every day.
So Gavin, how did this all come together?
Well, Federal Immigration Minister Mark Miller was also at the news conference this afternoon. He says Kinew called him up a few months back and expressed a desire to get children out of Gaza. Miller says, quote, "Collectively, we can do a lot better by the people of Gaza."
This is a beacon of hope, and I think it's a good message for all Canadians that we can open up our hearts to people who really need the top health care in the world.
So what did the Premier have to say about the futures of these kids here in Canada?
Well, Canoe says the province will support their right to return home when it is safe to do so, but if they decide to make their home here, then they will ensure there's a place so they can be Manitobans and Canadians too. Brittany.
All right, thank you so much. That's CBC's Gavin Axelrod. After delaying plans to vote on the package, the Israeli cabinet will convene to approve the Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal tomorrow. Earlier today, Israel accused Hamas of reneging on the deal. Hamas denied it. Now, with that dispute apparently resolved, the first stage of the ceasefire is set to be implemented on Sunday. Weary people on both sides are expressing hope, but also unease. In parts of Gaza today, Sunday must feel like a long way away. Officials in the territory say at least 77 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes since yesterday. As part of the first phase of the deal, much-needed aid is expected to begin rolling into the territory. Meanwhile, in the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, many say they're worried the hostages may not be released and the ceasefire might not hold. The first hostages, 33 of them, are supposed to be released Sunday. In return, Israel has agreed to halt the fighting in Gaza for at least 6 weeks. Riley Lachuk in now. Riley, it's been an afternoon of breaking news on that front, but also on your front, and there's a lot of colors behind you again, and that's not always a good sign.
Always a good thing to see, Brittany. Yeah, we're in for a bit of a rough ride here over the next 36 hours in Manitoba. So I'll start in the Red River Valley. We have a blizzard warning in place. We're looking at not so much in the way of snow in the Red River Valley over the next 24 hours, but it will be a story about the winds. Looking at winds picking up overnight through the day tomorrow. Could see some gusts, particularly west of the city, up to 90 kilometers an hour. So we're looking at some very windy conditions that could lead to some significantly reduced visibilities for periods of the afternoon tomorrow across southern Manitoba. Into the Westman region, this is a blowing snow advisory, looking at winds gusting up to 70 through the afternoon tomorrow. In the north, we have a snowfall warning in place for the Pas, Flin Flon, through Swan River, Grand Rapids, Barons River. Looking at the brunt of the snow falling in parts of northern Manitoba, up to 20 centimeters the further north you go in this area in white. And we have a blizzard warning for the Hudson Bay coast, looking at wind gusts to 80 kilometers an hour. Overnight into Saturday, we're looking at the potential early for some wind chills up to minus 50 in places like Churchill. So we did see a little bit of snow move through southern Manitoba. That's pushed off. We get a bit of a break. We'll see some warming temperatures through the overnight, and we'll start to see things dropping off as we get through the overnight period to minus 4 by the morning in Winnipeg. The snow begins through the overnight hours into the early morning, and look at those winds picking up northwest 40 to 60. Temperature falls to minus 13 by the afternoon, Brittany. We're looking at northwest winds in the city, 60, gusting 80. We'll time this all out for you when I come back in a little bit.
It is that weather roller coaster that we are all just along for the ride.
For sure.
Thank you, Riley.
Welcome.
Well, speaking of snow, if there's one thing that's important to Winnipeggers, it is that. Not just how much we're getting, but when it will be cleared from our roads. After floating the idea of allowing a little more snow to pile up before plows head out, the city says it will not be moving forward with a snow clearing pilot program it first announced just a little while ago. Cameron McLean has more.
The city of Winnipeg is backing away from a plan to change the way it does snow clearing after receiving a blizzard of negative feedback.
It had hoped to save money by raising the threshold for triggering the first residential snowplow from 10 centimeters to 15. Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham says he heard more negative feedback about that idea than anything else in the budget.
My office has had more emails and calls about the snow clearing pilot proposal than we have about the property tax increase. And so Winnipeggers are really want us to keep our snow clearing at the current standard, the current level.
Public Works Chair Janice Lukes put forward a motion today to cancel the project, which needs approval from council. Lukes says she always thought the project was a bad idea.
The feedback that really resonated with me was the concern of the public of mobility issues on streets where there's no sidewalks or pathways, because people have to use streets. We will never be able to afford a sidewalk or a pathway on every street in the city of Winnipeg.
Disability advocate Melissa Graham says she's glad the city listened to the concerns of the community.
Even though they were saying it wasn't impacting sidewalks, you still need to cross streets to get between sidewalks. So we were worried that would really impact mobility and accessibility for our community.
Mark Coho of Bike Winnipeg praised the city's decision.
And keeping people active, getting them walking, biking, busing is a savings to our city.
Gillingham says Winnipeg has among the best snow clearing operations in Canada, but this change was just too much for Winnipeggers to take. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Up in flames, a more than century-old building now gone. More on the historical significance of the Sutherland Hotel and what it means. That's coming up straight ahead. Stay with us. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. A hotel built when the city of Winnipeg was less than a decade old is now a pile of rubble surrounded by a metal fence. The Sutherland Hotel stood on Main Street for 143 years before it was destroyed by fire. As CBC's Bartley Kivas reports, business owners and residents fear nothing will replace it.
Bright orange flames billow out of the third floor of the vacant Sutherland Hotel, the latest structure in Winnipeg's North End to succumb to fire. Blazes in vacant buildings are becoming more common, according to the city.
We're going to a lot of fires in the city of Winnipeg. Our personnel are quite busy.
Firefighters don't believe anyone was injured in the Sutherland fire. The building was vacant and unheated. By morning, it was a demolition site. 143 years of history reduced to yet another vacant lot.
14-foot ceilings, nice big space.
Real estate agent Brad Gross says the Sutherland had just been sold. He says the new owners plan to develop it into housing. Gross surmises someone entered the premises and started a fire.
That's what people don't understand. When these buildings are empty, it's actually colder inside than it is outside. So that's probably why they start the fire, to keep it, bring some warmth in there. And
owners of other businesses along the Main Street Strip are concerned nothing will replace the Sutherland. Keith Horn, who owns the Northern Hotel on the other side of Main, said the North End Business Improvement Zone is losing members.
It's getting worse because 10 years ago, the Biz had 110 businesses. Now we have 57. So as people are retiring and closing up their shops, we're not getting replacement people to come in. We're not getting buildings rebuilt on empty plots of land.
Not everyone's sorry to see the Sutherland go. Point Douglas resident Robert Smith says the hotel was less than ideal even before it was vacant.
The hotel wasn't in the greatest conditions. Over the years, it was neglected, it wasn't looked after, and a lot of people that lived in there had to live with bed bugs, cockroaches, mice, and I suppose rats too.
The Sutherland fire also heavily damaged the 129-year-old Craig Block, an historic building that once housed the Order of Sleeping Car Porters, believed to be the first black union in North America. Nadia Thompson chairs Black History Manitoba.
People that were coming from the trains would go there, and it also was probably the first in North America to be that kind of union, and that were promoting fair wages and better conditions for the porters.
The owner of the Craig Block says he believes the building is a total loss. The cause of the fire at the Sutherland is still under investigation. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The province has started community consultation sessions for what would be Manitoba's first supervised consumption site. The CBC's Alana Cole now on what the consultation meetings are for and how people who attended a session today are feeling.
The Minister of Housing, Addictions and Homelessness says about 20 people showed up for a consultation meeting today on Manitoba's proposed supervised consumption site. We learned last month that an application named 200 Disraeli Freeway as the location for a possible site. Bernadette Smith says today's meeting was to get feedback on things like this location, safety, and what people want to see inside the site. Now, Smith says she knows people have concerns around safety and says that is the #1 priority for the province.
It's not just about folks using at the site, it's about connecting people to services and getting people on to a path of recovery. There's going to be amped up, police presence. We're going to have downtown community safety patrol. We're going to have wellness community community patrols outside. We're going to have an 8-foot fence encompassing the site. We're going to make sure that this is a safer community than it is now.
Smith says approval to open a supervised consumption site could take 2 years and that the location isn't finalized. I also spoke with a couple of people who went to the meeting. Sheila Page is a member of the Children's House Montessori School Board of Directors. She wants to hear more about a safety plan that involves more than just the immediate area around the site.
We have, as I say, 2.5 to 6-year-old children who play in the playground, go for walks in the neighborhood. So we have, I think, legitimate concerns about the increase in disruptive behaviors that may come about.
Sharon Johnson has lived in North Point Douglas for 16 years.
It sounded very organized and being led by people from a evidence-based approach.
Smith says there will be more consultation sessions and plans for a bigger town hall. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A regimental funeral will be held tomorrow for Manitoba First Nations Police Chief Doug Paulson. The 60-year-old was found dead after a fire in a Portage La Prairie home last Wednesday. RCMP confirmed today the fire was not suspicious. First Nations leaders across Manitoba are remembering Paulson as a trailblazer in policing. The service begins at 1 p.m. at the RBC Convention Centre. Well, Riley, you said this warmer weather was not going to continue.
Yeah.
It is going to get windier. It is going to sure get colder this weekend. Blizzard, I think, was the word that you used today, and not the kind from Dairy Queen.
No, absolutely not. Blizzard conditions through the Red River Valley, but very windy, really right across the southern part of the province as we head through the next 24 hours. Even into Saturday morning, Brittany, we're looking at some very treacherous driving conditions. I mean, not so much in the way of snow here in the southern part of the province, but it's the wind that kicks up any little bits of new snow that we do get that is really going to cause some problems.
A good time to stay inside.
Yeah.
If you can.
Yeah, let's time this out for you. So southern Manitoba, not so much here in Winnipeg, but parts of the south did see a little dusting of snow as we got through the afternoon hours today. But certainly that main event into central and northern Manitoba, that will continue making its way east as we get through the evening into the overnight period tonight. So overnight, we get a brief bit of clearing here in southern Manitoba. Our temperatures really start to surge and warm up a little bit as we get through the overnight hours as this low pressure system makes its way across the central part of the province. Behind that, the system wraps back around on itself, bringing some very gusty northwesterly winds as we get through into the morning hours and certainly into the afternoon on Friday, and more of a steady snow, albeit not much in the way of accumulation, but certainly some snow across southern Manitoba and into northwestern Ontario. That does very quickly clear out, but we do keep the winds as we get through Friday and into Saturday when we start to see a little bit more clearing as we get through the weekend. So in terms of accumulation, yes, this central band of the province, Grand Rapids, Barons River, Swan River, Flin Flon, looking at that general 10 to 15 up to 20 centimeters of snow. Only, 2 to 3 centimeters through the Red River Valley, but factor in some wind into that, and we're really getting ourselves into a bit of trouble here as we get through into the day on Friday. So even by 9 o'clock in the morning, looking at northwest winds, 60 gusting to 80. When you start to see some of these light blues and reds here, this are wind gusts upwards of 90 kilometers an hour. In Winnipeg, we start to see those winds picking up as we get through the morning hours, 50 gusting 70, even up to 80 as we get through the afternoon hours Friday. So we are looking at a very windy day tomorrow. Not to say it won't be windy across the rest of the western side of the province and into northwestern Ontario, where we're looking at wind gusts 50, 60 kilometers an hour, but certainly it's the Red River Valley, the south central part of the province, where we're really looking at some of those extreme wind gusts as we get through the day tomorrow. So as I mentioned, as we get through the day tomorrow, this is going to mean low visibility on highways. So keep that in mind if you have any travel through the day tomorrow, overnight into Saturday. So temperatures waking up -4 in Winnipeg, -8s for Brandon and Dauphin. We sink to -13 through the afternoon, Brittany, and then we're into the deep freeze through the weekend, and we start to warm up a bit as we get into the middle part of next week.
I say thank you, but I don't necessarily mean it. But thanks, Riley.
You're welcome.
Here's a look at the lake at St. Malo as we head to break. We have much more to come after this. Former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney has officially entered the Liberal leadership race. He announced it in Edmonton, the city where he grew up. And the Liberal candidate is already attracting support as well as attacks from the Conservatives. The CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian reports.
Mark Carney returning to Edmonton, where he spent his childhood and learned to skate to set up the roots of his campaign launch.
I am going to be completely focused on getting our economy back on track. I've helped manage multiple crises, and I've helped save 2 economies.
Carney is the former governor of the Banks of Canada and England, steering the 2 countries through the economic recession of 2008 and Brexit, respectively. There have been reports for years he was considering joining the Liberals, fueled more recently by the governing party's plummeting fortunes in electoral polls as Canadians flock to the opposition Conservatives. Then last week, the Prime Minister announced his resignation, leaving the doors wide open for the race to replace him.
I'm coming into this match, coming into this game, knowing that we are well behind. But we're getting warmed up, and we're going to head out in that 3rd period, and we're going to win.
Carney's already gathered the public support of about a dozen caucus members, including some of those who had been calling for Trudeau's departure in recent months.
These are challenging times. In times like this, most people run and hide. But today, we are witness to someone standing up.
Mark Carney is back from Europe.
But just as public, the crosshairs on his back from Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives, trying to bury his campaign before it's off the ground.
Carbon tax Carney. He's just like Justin.
That's to say nothing of the competition he will face from other contenders for the outgoing Prime Minister's job, including former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, who is expected to officially launch her campaign on Sunday. A source close to her has said she intends to scrap the carbon tax. Liberals will elect their new leader on March 9th, effectively giving this country a new Prime Minister until the next federal election. Rafi Boudjikanian on CBC News, Ottawa.
The days could be numbered for a key government policy to deal with the climate crisis. The so-called carbon tax has been in the crosshairs of the Conservatives for years. Now some Liberal leadership hopefuls are signaling they're prepared to ditch it. David Thurton has more.
At a steel manufacturing company, Justin Trudeau defended one of his big political legacies, even if its days are numbered.
Future governments will make the choices they make, but Canadians can know that it is possible to both fight climate change and put more money in the pockets of the middle class at the same time.
And our climate is changing in ways that threatens livelihoods from Fort Mac to Fort Smith.
Those vying to replace him are signaling if they become leader, it's gone.
I've said for a long time that if you were going to take out the carbon tax, you should replace it with something that is at least, if not more, effective.
Mark Carney is not the only one. As the former Deputy Prime Minister gets ready to enter the race, Chrystia Freeland, according to a source, is expected to ditch the policy, and she will replace it with a system that premiers support.
The carbon tax has been very difficult from a policy perspective.
Enthusiasm among Liberals for consumer carbon pricing has dimmed.
There's different ways to be able to go about fighting climate change, and if a leader wants to be able to change that, I would fully support it.
If there's a leadership candidate that's thinking about it, I'm not necessarily going to discourage it.
Drivers pay the federal carbon tax at the pump, families on home heating fuel. Many, not all Canadians, get more money back through quarterly checks.
Now they have a carbon tax. That's 17 cents a liter.
Pierre Poilievre is still calling for the carbon tax to be the next ballot box question.
If we had a carbon tax election now, we could elect a strong, stable, national majority government that would stand up for all Canadians.
Eliminating the consumer carbon tax would leave a big hole in Canada's climate plan. Conservatives haven't said in a detailed way how they would make up for that. Liberal leadership candidates in this race also haven't said how they would close the emissions gap. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
A town in rural Ontario offers a stark example of the doctor shortage many parts of the country are facing. On Wednesday, several residents had to stand in line in freezing weather for a chance at getting a family physician. The CBC's Jamie Strachan reports.
I'm going to give you a hug an hour later. Thank you.
After hours in a line that snaked around Walkerton's Legion Hall and down surrounding streets, Susan Marshall is cold.
I'm sorry, but I'm frozen. My lips are frozen right now.
But the payoff is huge. After 5 years, she will finally have a family doctor. Walkerton is getting a new physician. 500 patients will get a spot. No triage, though, just first come, first served. More than 1,000 people showed up.
I actually saw this post on Facebook, of all places, and I thought with today's weather that there wouldn't be so many folks.
It says that there's a problem. If there's this many people willing to come out in a snowstorm to try and get a doctor.
More than 1,000 people came to line up here in the cold, in the snow, all desperate. All with stories of what life has been like without a family doctor.
My husband, he has fairly serious health issues, and many times I feel like I'm not able to cope.
Most end up in the ER or simply go untreated.
I just absolutely wait it out until I absolutely have to go to the hospital.
There is similar desperation in many parts of the country. More than 6 million Canadians don't have a family doctor.
We're seeing Hunger Games all across Ontario.
It's unsustainable, says the president of the Ontario Medical Association.
What happens when you can't find a family doctor? You end up using the emergency department for care. You end up missing cancer, another important preventive care.
Now, in Walkerton, some just got a much-needed lifeline.
We've had 5 years now without a doctor, so it feels like we won the lottery.
But in Canada's new reality of universal health care, many others who braved the cold and snow lost again. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Walkerton, Ontario.
The Israeli cabinet has yet to vote on the ceasefire deal with Hamas. If it is approved, the first phase of the agreement is expected to begin Sunday, as Israeli families of hostages and Palestinians anxiously wait. Deadly strikes continue in Gaza. CBC's Chris Brown has more from Jerusalem.
In Gaza, in the final hours before a possible ceasefire, Israel delivered some of the deadliest strikes of the war against what it says were Hamas targets. Health authorities claim more than 70 people were killed in the last day alone. A Hamas statement said the barrage might also have killed one of the Israeli hostages due to be released Sunday, adding to the torment of those who fear the truce could still fall apart.
Hamas have made changes even after the agreement.
Israel's government accused Hamas of trying to torpedo it, which Hamas denied. With intense pressure coming from all sides to complete the deal, Israel's cabinet rescheduled a final vote to Friday as mediators work to resolve what they characterized as last-minute snags.
Look, it's not exactly surprising that in a process and a negotiation that has been this challenging and this fraught, you may get a loose end.
This is dirty, bloodthirsty politics at its peak.
7 members of Zohar Avigdori's extended family were kidnapped from Kibbutz Be'eri on October the 7th. Most were released in November of 2023, but Tal Shaham is still in captivity. He wants Israel to complete the deal, even though some hostages, including his relative, will not be returned immediately and possibly not at all.
It gives us very little certainty and clarity about how we're going to get all of the 98 back, and it leaves us with huge distress and anger.
Other Israelis don't want the war to end until Hamas is totally defeated. They carried fake coffins outside of the Prime Minister's office on Thursday. Many of them are related to Israeli soldiers killed in the war.
Don't sign the deal with the Hamas. This deal, it's a very dangerous deal for the hostages that will stay in Gaza.
Israelis may have reservations about whether they're letting Hamas off the hook, but for those in Gaza, the consensus is much clearer. With Israel's military killing dozens every day, the end of hostilities can't come soon enough. Chris Brown, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Bollywood star Saif Ali Khan has been stabbed after an intruder barged into his home in Mumbai. The 54-year-old actor has had to undergo surgery for the multiple wounds. CBC's Salima Shivji is in New Delhi and has the latest.
He's out of danger now and recovering in an ICU bed in hospital. But Bollywood star Saif Ali Khan had a big scare earlier today when an intruder managed to enter his home in a ritzy area of Mumbai in the early hours at about 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, Saif Ali Khan is from a very prominent celebrity family. He and his wife, superstar Kareena Kapoor, are actually considered Bollywood royalty. The knife that was used to attack Khan was actually lodged inside his spine, and he had to undergo surgery to have it removed, and also to repair leaking spinal fluid. Khan had about 6 stab wounds, 2 of them very deep in his neck and arm. The doctor treating him confirms. Mumbai police are investigating, and they do believe this was all part of a botched robbery attempt. Officers think that the intruder used a fire escape to enter the home while the family, including the couple's 2 young sons, were sleeping. Now, Kareena Kapoor, Khan's wife, has released a statement saying this has been an extremely challenging day for the family and that they're still trying to process what happened, as she called for the media to give them a little bit of space and privacy to actually process what happened. And Mumbai police have actually set up about 20 teams to continue this investigation to try to track down the suspect. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Delhi.
Still ahead, what once was a historic building that housed railway workers is now rubble. The Sutherland Hotel burned to the ground yesterday. After the break, we take a closer look at the impact it had. A massive fire has destroyed the building that once housed the Sutherland Hotel on Main Street. Well, the building was vacant and boarded up, and for many, likely an eyesore. It holds a rich history for our city. The bones of the building are more than a century old. Local historian Christian Cassidy joins me now. Christian, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Christian, the building was opened back in 1882. Tell me a little bit about what was happening in Winnipeg and the significance of this building back then.
Well, yes, the building opened in 1882 as the Cosmopolitan Hotel. And so some of the bones date back to that. A lot of these hotels were expanded to the rear, and a floor was added above over the decades. But the core of the hotel would have been the Cosmopolitan Hotel. And 1882, of course, was the year that the CPR arrived in Winnipeg. So it was kind of the start of the booming prairie town that lasted for a number of decades, the Chicago of the North. All of that kind of started with the arrival of the CPR. So the Cosmopolitan was very tied to the railway. It was so close to the station that many of the first people who lived there were actual CPR employees who were transferred from out west. So probably a majority of the rooms for the first few years were actual railway employees who lived there rather than hotel guests, overnight hotel guests.
So it's really changed names a number of times over the years, and most recently the building, as we said, was boarded up, but it's held a lot of history, as you mentioned here with the railway. It never held heritage status and it wasn't protected. Do you think it should have been? Should we have done more?
I think it had a couple of strikes against it. I think that these older SRO hotels, we look down upon them in the era we live in now. So that's one strike against it, and also where it is. It's in a bad part, the Main Street Strip, bad part of town, and I don't think that the buildings in neighborhoods like that get the same amount of credit as if it would have been, say, one block south. And that's unfortunate. And I think that some of those biases that seem to be built into whether you give heritage protection to certain buildings is unfortunate, and this may have suffered from that.
We talked a little bit about the railway and the significance this hotel played for it, but it's also an important area of town historically for the Black community. Can you touch base on that and what losing these types of buildings mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So Winnipeg's early Black population was very much tied to the CPR and the sleeping car porters that came to town. So a lot of the early Black community were temporary, would be people who would be just here for sometimes a few months at a time, sometimes just a few years, and then they would move on to another depot. And so a lot of the buildings related to that community were stationed in and around the CPR depot. And the building that is right up next to the Sutherland Hotel, which is still standing, and I don't know how badly it was damaged in the fire, is the Craig Block. And that block was built in the 1890s, but in the 1920s, it became home to the Sleeping Car Porters Union. And that was a locally organized union. And some people believe that it's the first Black union in North America because it was created a few years before its American counterpart. And for years, for decades, it had an office in that building. It was joined by other Black organizations, especially from the States. They would open up kind of a branch office here. There was a hall upstairs that was used for different bands and cultural events, and Black-owned businesses on the main floor. And some of these Black organizations remained in this building until the 1980s. And that just is a story, again, I think because of the part of town that it's in and the rundown nature of these two buildings side by side. That story is not really well told, and that's unfortunate because when these buildings burn down, you lose all those stories.
A lot of history now to remind us of where we came and what we can do to maybe protect some other buildings that are in this position. Christian, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Riley's back in now. And Riley, you've been talking about this impending blizzard that we're going to get here in the southern part of the province. Many of us, when we hear that word, think big snowstorm. We're going to be digging out for days, as you said a few minutes ago. Not necessarily the case.
You don't necessarily, when a blizzard warning is issued, you don't necessarily have to have that large dump of snow. There's actually a very defined set of criteria for what makes a blizzard warning here in Manitoba that Environment Canada uses to issue those warnings. And snow actually not in that set of criteria per se. So you don't have to have a lot of snow, but let's get into it because there are a couple of things here that are kind of interesting. So it's three sets of four. So first off, you need winds of 40 kilometers an hour or greater, plus visibility of 400 meters or less with blowing snow, some of that fresh snow that we're expecting. That has prompted that, and lasting at least 4 hours. So Environment Canada has already issued that blizzard warning, anticipating that we'll check all three of these boxes as we get through the day tomorrow. And certainly when you add in some fresh snow plus a prolonged period of some very strong winds, we'll very quickly meet that criteria as we get through the day on Friday, certainly through the Red River Valley. You know who's not going to complain about all this snow? Bentley. Bentley looks like he really enjoys going for a little bit of a dive in the snow there. Bentley from Flin Flon. Thanks, Eric, for sending me this picture today. You can send yours to talkback@cbc.ca. Flin Flon certainly in that snowfall warning where we're looking at that up to 20 centimeters of snow by the time we get to this time on Friday. So in Winnipeg, we're looking at our temperature starting at -4, rising a little bit overnight, but -4 by the time we get to the morning. And then we're looking at temperatures really falling off as we get into the afternoon hours tomorrow. Northwest winds in Winnipeg, 60 gusting to 80 by 4 o'clock and staying at about -13. So behind that, as we get into the weekend, we start to get this real dip bridge of high pressure starting to set in really across the prairie provinces. And this is what will define our weather pattern here for the next several days into next week at least here. So as we get into Sunday, you can see this real deep Arctic ridge really starting to sink south into the Midwest, parts of southern Ontario. This is some of the coldest air that we will be seeing for the season, and certainly the further east you go, the coldest air that we have seen in quite some time. So we're setting in for some very cold conditions that will be lasting, in Manitoba at least, into mid next week. Overnight tonight, temperatures around -10, above seasonal, but we start to see that those periods of snow starting to move in to parts of the province, 10 to 15 centimeters in that northwestern corner through Norway House, Barons River, Island Lake through the day tomorrow. We do clear out, but we keep the winds in northern Manitoba through the day tomorrow. Northwest 50 gusting to 70 along the Hudson Bay coast. Temperatures barely cracking -20 by the time we get to the afternoon hours. In West Man, gusts 70 plus. Not a lot of snow. That has moved off by the time we start the day on Friday. And even by lunchtime, we're out of the snow for most of Manitoba. But the winds, we will keep the winds through the afternoon, gusting 80 plus, even up to 90 for some parts of southern Manitoba, Brittany, as we get through the day on Friday. Behind that, colder temperatures in your 7-day.
Thanks, Riley.
You're welcome.
In Los Angeles, improving weather conditions are helping the firefighting effort there after more than a week of raging wildfires. Firefighters yesterday were able to get a handle on a rapidly spreading fire in San Bernardino. There were no reported injuries. Meanwhile, the two biggest wildfires are no longer expanding, and those Santa Ana winds are forecast to ease in many areas. Still, nearly 100,000 people are out of their homes, and many won't have homes to return to. The expanse of the Los Angeles wildfires' destruction, meantime, has overwhelmed the world. Seen up close, one house at a time, it's just as overwhelming. The CBC's Cameron McIntosh takes this look at one street in the district of Altadena.
This is the Altadena neighborhood of Los Angeles, Glen Rose Avenue, and here's a story of one block. This was on the edge of the evacuation zone. People are starting to come back. Many are finding scenes like this, houses completely gone. Now, this started when the trees in the back caught on fire. The fire spread. Alba Maida and her family, they've been coming here looking for anything that they can salvage. She only speaks Spanish. Her 12-year-old son says they've found nothing. How does it feel to see this?
It's really sad because my whole entire life here, 12 years, every single year here.
Now over here next door at the neighbors, they lost their garage and likely their family business, but check this out. They've started a completely grassroots donation center. Clothes, food, baby supplies, pretty much anything that anyone who lost everything may need just to get to the next day.
We got diapers, wipes, formula. Like there's boys' clothes here, girls' clothes there. I couldn't sit back and just not do anything, you know? Especially since our house was left standing. I felt like it was for a reason.
Come down the street a little, you can see how random this all can be. This house destroyed. The one next to it still standing. Gary Hampton has lived here since he was 3.
Well, it's a good thing we got out. You know, we didn't get burned up. But yeah, it's, we thankful for what we got.
Look up. A red streak of fire retardant stains the mountain above as life here resumes. All of these people, neighbors, all of them hit by the fire in different ways. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Altadena.
Well, with the winter storm barreling down on Manitoba, maybe a game of Scrabble is in the cards. After the break, how a group of Maritimers are increasing the game's popularity. And Riley's back with the last check on weather. Stay with us.
So here's a look at radar as this first sort of area of snow moves through Manitoba into northwestern Ontario. Kind of missed Winnipeg, a few flurries late afternoon, but certainly north of the city getting a few flurries through the afternoon hours today. We get periods of snow overnight tonight in Winnipeg. Winds pick up northwest 60, gusting to 80 by the time we get to the afternoon hours. Our temperature falling to minus 13 by the afternoon, minus 22 for Saturday, 24, 25 below through Sunday and Monday, albeit a lot brighter as we head into early next week. And then we're looking at temperatures starting to moderate a little bit by the time we get to late next week. Good chance we could see a few flurries through Wednesday and Thursday of next week with highs of minus 9. Well, on a snowy and cold winter night, there might not be anything better than cuddling up with a good board game.
Yeah, well, interest in Charlottetown's Scrabble Club is growing. Their first anniversary, how many points is that word worth? That's our Daily Lift.
It's a challenge. It's exciting in its own way. Sometimes it's a really frustrating game.
This is Charlottetown's first official Scrabble Club. We roll all the tables together to make one long continuous table. We'll start playing one-on-one games, and we might get about 20 people. So that's 10 games going simultaneously at one long table, which makes for a lot of camaraderie and fun and back and forth interplay.
It's a wonderful board game that requires a little bit of thought, and I've been getting regular lessons here on my faults and flaws in my thinking process.
It's a mix of the vocabulary, like learning, but also the kind of the math behind it all, how to like learn how to play differently, because it's not about knowing the words, but knowing the right time and place to use them for.
I saw what was needed to get down to the triple word score, and then I extended words to wordsmith by adding the MITH. And it was a lot of points, and I got a wow from my opponent. So that's one of my favorites. Everyone is enjoying watching themselves get better and finding that word or making that score. And everyone's really enjoying themselves.
I don't have that kind of strategy. If I have a word, I'm playing it.
I know.
Wherever it fits.
Even if it's cat, I will use it. Like
wherever it fits.
Yeah, it's a game of strategy and also a game where you really have to know the dictionary well.
Or you can cheat.
Or that.
Well, we hope you have a wonderful night. Stay safe, stay warm, and stay cuddled up.
Yes,
we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.